From the archives of the great library of Arathes, Golden City of Elves, the wise scholars of Grey Sage present the unlikely and highly questionable accounts from those who were avowed witness. These are the suspenseful investigations of the human, Fraenk Neversleep, Arch-Preceptor of Blackroot. And now, the Neversleep Scrolls, Circle of the Mind Thief, written by Philip Walton. The story continues.
Part 5. Chapter 24. Kyla Gracefire jolted awake, sweaty and gasping, afflicted by another one of those dreams. There were no dragons or giants in this one, however, no beast emerging from the pit, just strange shifting visions showing things that were happening or could still happen. Of course, they were never direct or straightforward. The mystic dreams always seemed to be coded in symbols and visual allegory. For years as a girl, Kyla had been forced to write them down. Everything seen, heard, and felt. She filled tomes with long passages that read like the storybook of a madman. Her caretaker's intent had been to one day find a seer who could read and interpret them. None could with any accuracy, but that did not stop the endless line of pretenders, sages and charlatans alike. There was no difference to Kyla's mind, pored over the volumes, making predictions and portents from her words. The accuracy of their forecast far less important than their conviction that it would come to pass. Some were right sometimes, others were wrong most of the time. And finally, after years and a waning interest in her mind, for her body was just starting to ripen into womanhood, Kyla's caregivers abandoned her dreams, hoping she would follow suit. She ran away not long after that. Her line may be special, but she was no brood mare to be sold off to some wealthy elf lord who wanted the essence of the divine in his progeny. Despite the curated nature of her life, Kyla immediately saw through their transparent attempts to see her productive. Handsome elf-kind spending hours doting on her, with their cloying sweet demeanour, like a whole jar of honey poured down the throat. And then there were the others who were more direct with their intentions. Those too got rebuffed with a reciprocal enthusiasm which made them disinclined for amorous adventures, at least until the swelling subsided. Kyla would be scolded and ordered to behave, a concept which she understood they meant subservient. This was something she had not the inclination nor the capacity to do. It could have been the dreams speaking to her, but somehow she knew her value, and it was not to make rich a room full of sanctimonious hypocrites who claimed to be servants of the divine. The caregivers lamented their underestimation of her mind after she orchestrated her elaborate liberation. They did not tire in trying to find such a valuable creature, but were ultimately unsuccessful. She would have liked to see their anguished faces when they finally realized she would never be returning to them. And perhaps she did. Once, in a dream. Inasmuch as she would have liked to ignore it, the dream Kyla had just awakened from was heavy with portents. There was something urgent in the message, like a friend shouting a warning from the other side of the room, through a closed door. She reached for parchment and quill instinctively and was about to write it all down. But she stopped herself. Why was she doing this? Kyla told herself that there was naught to be gained from it. Just another page in a tome. Colourful, but lacking meaning. She looked down to see her hand writing on its own accord, transcribing the visions she had seen. A darkened room set with silver plates, each set with their own item, and then blood poured over them from above. A fetish doll with oversized breasts, 2 identical candles, a loaf of brown bread steaming fresh from the oven, and finally a crystalline tray with a pipe, all trickled with rich red plasma. Then the vision shifted. She saw a dark prison cell with stone walls and iron bars blocking all the exits. But then came a flickering light and hand emerging from the sonorous gloom. A circle of men raising their arms in ululation around an orbit of flames. Their leader was someone familiar, but he wore a subtle, beautiful mask. Then Kyla dreamed of the great tree again, the one she had seen before in previous night visions. And he was up there. She saw his sad face, the kobold, the one she loved. He put out his hand to her, but as she tried, she could not reach it. Then a mighty phoenix rose up and beat its flaming wings of cinder and sparks until all that was left of the tree was the tall white trunk and brilliant light coming out of the top. A sinking feeling like she was dying gripped Kyla, followed by intense vertigo looking down from a great height, but at something terrible and hungry. She heard a voice yelling, "Pull, pull!" But she had nothing to grip. Her hands only felt air. Smashed from her thoughts, Kyla looked at the parchment and her scribblings. It was worse than a page full of gibberish. It was warnings she could not heed and hope she could not believe in. She almost crumpled the page and tossed it to the floor. The one part she held on to, though, was of him. He was still reaching for her. She had to find him. If he was still out there somewhere, she could not give up. Kyla swung her feet to the floor and let the sensation of the cool stone ground her. The little adventure she had with that mysterious man in the bakery had taken its toll on her. She thought she might have been ready, but the exertion and running away from arcane shadow dogs had proved too much. Kyla was forced to spend several more days in bed to recuperate. In those hours, Kyla had time to think about everything that had transpired and what it meant, specifically this dark spectre who she initially mistook as Posu. Who was this Fraenk Neversleep? From what she could tell, he was reckless, persistent, annoying, and... what else? Stupid. Yes, quite a verified moron, this one. He also had other qualities that she had to admit weren't completely terrible. He did help her escape the Blackhounds by letting them chew on him instead. Another strike in the stupid tally. He couldn't climb walls, which wasn't entirely his fault. Kyla had acquired special enchanted gloves and boots, which helped her with scaling difficult inclines. He wasn't mean or cruel. She could tell by his demeanour. Not bad. And there was a sort of annoying charm about him. His smile was acceptable. By certain standards, some might even say he was quite handsome. But not Kyla, of course. She was just trying to objectively weigh his merits. So, he's a handsome idiot that I'm certainly not attracted to, Kyla said aloud to the empty room. Okay, Kyla, time to get up. Kyla rose and walked around the room. Despite the downtime, her legs were unexpectedly steady, and the pain in her side was nearly entirely gone. She enlisted the help of the innkeeper's gawky son to procure healing tinctures from the temple, which he was all too eager to do once he had gazed upon the splendour of her face. It was unethical to use her innate ability in that way, she knew, but Kyla needed all the help she could get. Without the potion's healing effects, her recovery would have been much longer and much more difficult. She had lost so much time. Hopefully, she didn't waste too much lying in bed. Whether she felt ready or not, she had to get some answers. Their job had gone wrong. Well, wrong was an understatement akin to calling the Pale not a very safe place to live, or that the Gazean dragon priests smelled like grilled meat. Since that sadistic monster had assassinated the other members of her team, and they had no contingency for such a disaster, where was her friend likely to turn? If he was even alive... She started to think, then pushed it away. Their client, who had used an intermediary, but she nevertheless figured out was the elven Lord Fernbrook, had shown early that he might betray them. First was the mere fact that he was an elf, and a wealthy, entitled one at that. Elves were no more honest than the average human, despite their supposed reputation for being honourable and their ethereal demeanour. Kyla had come to know that men with power held with lower regard those who were beneath them. They wouldn't even see it as wicked to take advantage of someone. It was merely the privilege of their station. Second, Lord Fernbrook himself was said to be quite shrewd in business, which was a diplomatic way of saying that he had a nasty reputation for underhanded deal-making to his own benefit. He left a swath of unpaid tradesmen for various goods and services over the years, and any that complained too loudly or often would turn up dead in an alley somewhere. According to some whispers, the Hard Oak elves refused to do any kind of deal with him whatsoever. Those two reasons alone should have been enough to call off the job. The final warning sign was that their arch-preceptor, who insisted upon meeting someone from the team before he engaged their services, had been excessively interested in how they were going to go about securing the item in question. He asked about their process and how each part would go. The broker had deflected, charmed, and lied where she could in order to secure the job, but something felt wrong about the way he probed. He reminded Kyla of a young elfling she knew who enjoyed cutting open live animals because he said he wanted to see how they worked. In Kyla's experience, those who wanted to know too much were either past victims of a deal gone wrong or looking for an opportunity to exploit the plan. Either way, it should have been the final weight which tipped the scales into abandoning this caper. But Kyla's objections were ultimately overruled by the others. They had received half the money before the job even started, and the payoff was too good to be ignored. And even if things did go awry, her fail-safes should have protected them. There was no way she could have predicted just how badly this whole situation would get. It didn't stop the guilt she felt, however. The Fernbrooks obviously didn't know where Posu or the item was. If they did, they wouldn't be making such a clumsy attempt to recover it. Buying the entire lower market bazaar just to sweep out the bakery? Ridiculous. And their arch-preceptor with his brute force attempts to locate both her and the kobold easily avoided. What she could not figure out was where did Posu Faljaun go? If he couldn't reach Kyla, or any other member of the team, where would he turn? He didn't know anyone else in the city. The uneducated might assume he'd turn to the other kobolds who lived here. But kobolds were mistrustful by nature, even towards others of their species. No, Posu would have gone to an ally. Someone they all knew and who knew the city. Then Kyla had a strong inclination of who that might be. When she finally tracked him down, Kyla found Dandrican seated on a stool at the Royal Consort, a grimy tavern just on this side of the border of Blackroot District. Kyla noted how the conflated name of a place was often directly opposite to how nice of a place it was. This filthy watering hole exemplified that rule completely. Nearly every surface was tacky with some kind of unknown greasy substance, including the regulars, who silently nursed pint after pint of ale in a slow march toward whatever merciful darkness would claim them. Kyla found a disguise was required for her to be in there and attract no attention. The natural allure that she seemed to radiate like the phosphorescent glow of a cave mushroom was compounded by the fact that no other ladies seemed to patronize this place. More the wiser them. This place made a dung heap seem a preferable location to sit with a beer. Using the skills of her tradecraft, Kyla dressed in an ensemble that gave off a look of out-of-work fishmonger with a touch of might be infected with the skin scales. In the end, the result worked a little too well, and she had to wait half of an hour to finally be served. This, too, was fine. She wasn't there to drink, just to give that appearance. Kyla had followed Dandrican to this place at a safe remove. He walked with the unhurried meandering of someone too oblivious to even realize they should be paranoid. Not once had he checked behind him, or stopped suddenly, or even done anything to throw off a pursuer. Overconfidence was the domain of men who never believed their deeds would catch up with them. Perhaps he truly had not a care in the world. Once he had found a seat in the tavern, which put him at the focus of the space, Dandrican started into a conversation. But not with her. Whoever this large, brooding figure was that Dandrican was talking to, Kyla didn't know, and decided it was best to find out before she made her next move.
I feel like I know you from somewhere, soldier.
Dandrican started cheerfully. Kyla had noticed the big man seated there when she entered, and his whole being made her feel unsafe. His shoulders were broad, and he had long, greasy hair that hung in his face. When spoken to, the large man uttered a bear-like growl to scare this annoyance away, but Dandrican was undeterred.
A hero of the war, perhaps?
Dandrican continued.
Although why a champion of Arathes would be drinking alone, I know not.
Dandrican made an exaggerated effort to peer into the man's cup. As he did, he slid into the chair beside him.
And your tankard is dry. Well, I won't have it.
Dandrican tapped a coin on the bar top twice and laid it flat. The slow-eyed barkeep waddled over and refilled the soldier's cup. Instead of thanking him, The soldier took a long drink, then gave Dandrican a scowl. "You're wasting your coin, fool," the soldier grumbled. "Whatever your wares, I'm not buying."
You wound me, sir. As you can see, I'm the one buying, and I've got coin, aplenty.
Kyla signalled for a drink from the barkeep as well, just so it wouldn't look like she was there to eavesdrop. What was Dandrican up to? He was definitely a talker and more than a little lonely, hiding out in his plague house all day. Was this brutish man his idea of good company? Something told her there was more to this than what was on the surface. The soldier raised his cup and drained it, his throat ratcheting to swallow the dark, bitter spirits. He belched and wiped his mouth with the back of a hand.
A mighty thirst.
Dandrican seemed delighted and quickly beckoned for another pour.
I am called Dandrican, if you wish to know the name of your refreshing benefactor.
The soldier belched again even louder, then smirked. "Did I say it right?"
Very droll, sir, very droll.
Dandrican barked with laughter. "If you like that, I can do one that sounds exactly like a Shivan when you trod on their tail." Who was this guy? Kyla decided she didn't like this soldier much either.
What do they call you, sir?
Dandrican pressed after the man's cup was finally refilled. "Leos Muninga," the soldier replied, his mood turning brighter with each drink.
Very pleased indeed.
Dandrican shook his hand before Leos could offer it.
Say, why are you alone here in such a place, at such an hour?
There was a thin dig in the question Kyla could hear. The big man didn't seem bothered, however. "No work, no coin. What else am I to do?" Leos said bitterly. "I almost had a job, but an old friend backed out on me. Foul crook."
Oh, that is a shame.
Dandrican cooed.
Who was this brigand who wronged you?
"The great lord, Neversleep, the golden man of Blackroot." Leo spit the words with heavy disdain. "He was raised in the streets, you know, just like me. Forgets where he come from." Neversleep. Kyla's ears perked up even more. Why were they now talking about this man? Was there anywhere in this city she could go to be away from him?
More's the loss for him.
A playfulness came back into Dandrican's voice.
Well, I should think that an able man such as yourself would have no trouble in the rough and ready trades.
"Yeah, me and every other swinging kiv out there. Not enough work to go around." Leos took another big drink.
Nonsense!
The young man pounded the bar with his fist, the sudden loud noise drawing looks from the regulars. Dandrican grabbed Leos by the shoulder, then leaned in close. If the place had been busier or noisier, Kyla would have missed what was said next.
I happen to be looking to retain such a ready figure. My line of work sometimes requires a guard.
Muninger leaned back on his stool to get a full measure of this man. Dandrican in his faded robes, which were meant to give the impression he was some type of wizard. His smell decantly carried the essence of the plague house. And yet, despite a bevy of indicators that would warn caution, Dandrican seemed to charm anyway. It was how Kyla and her crew were taken in as well.
I pay well and you'll never go thirsty. Plus, I offer something else that I'm not at liberty to say around this mangy lot.
Dandrican said, and cast suspiciously about the room. For one heart-stopping moment, his eyes fixed right on Kyla. She was certain that somehow he recognized her. But then Leos spoke, drawing his attention back. "I could use the coin, I guess." Leos shrugged and drank more ale.
Excellent, sir. Leos, may I call you that? I'm certain we will become fast friends.
Dandrican clapped the big man on the back.
Come by my place on the morrow. Fernbrook Plague House, around back. I've got a very important task for you to do.
What illicit dealings was this? Was Dandrican worried about his security? Kyla smirked to herself. He probably should be, considering how she had tracked him down and was now waiting for her chance to confront him. But there was something about this exchange that seemed very off to her. What was his plan, and would it go poorly for this unwary man, Leos? Probably it would, given what traumatic events she just survived. Kyla had to fight the sudden urge to jump up and caution the soldier against any and all dealings with this man. She wasn't sure to what purpose, but Dandrican was a schemer. Others had to see it, didn't they? Instead, she chose to keep silent. She would soon have her moment with Dandrican, and she wanted it to be a private one. Kyla would have answers one way or another. Some time later, Dandrican hobbled out of the bar. To Kyla, he looked tipsy, but not completely drunk like the other man had been when they finally parted company. She followed quietly, watching as he oriented himself on the street and turned in the direction of his home. After walking nearly a block, the call of nature apparently grew urgent, and he turned into an alleyway. Dandrican muttered to himself and fiddled clumsily with the drawstrings on his trousers, before turning his pizzle out and firing a hot stream of urine against the stone. Dandrican tipped his head back and sighed deeply with satisfaction, which was when Kyla pressed her blade against his throat.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for another exciting episode. And remember, the learned scholars of Grey Sage caution you that the veracity of these events remains unproven. Now go safe in the light of the powers, until our hands clasp again.